Well, as we conclude here, it's interesting to consider that we will be on this quarantine window for a month come Friday. Pretty amazing, too, to think about that also being called Good Friday. I think so much more because of what Christ did 2,000 years ago. I hope that you guys have a wonderful Easter. I'll be encouraging you with that even in class on Wednesday, but encourage you guys as we step into that window to celebrate as we consider just how much Christ has done for us. Well, I want to go ahead and turn our attention to how people responded and what some of the realities were during the plague window. As you think about how people have responded even during this time of pandemic, I think it's been amazing to see just a wide variety of different responses. Some people kind of being flagrant and cavalier about it. And basically, I mean, even early on, over when college went to spring break, how people would go down to Florida and basically like, I'm invincible, so bring it on. And then other people have retreated and basically holed up during this time. And so, and you have everything in between. However, at this point, there were some during the plague who responded more like the latter and were going to retreat. They would have people that had similar ways of thinking, and they were going to now establish smaller communities. They would avoid the sick, trying to protect themselves from any connection with the illness, and as a general rule, tried to avoid excess. What I mean by that is they wouldn't go reacting and even partying during this time. They believed that this was a time to be contemplative and quiet, and instead of being out there, they would now kind of pull back. Um, yeah, just as a way of reflecting, and even for some of them, I think within Christianity at that point, seeking the Lord during that time. However, as we talked about earlier, there were some who operated and responded on quite the opposite end of the spectrum. Some saw this as a potentially last ditch opportunity to go out and have fun. And so they would eat and they would drink and they would do everything to excess. This was their opportunity to live it up. In their minds, they figured they might be close to death anyway. And so why not use that moment to party it up and to do everything that they could? They even used some of the buildings that had been abandoned, structures that had been owned even by people that were either quarantined, walled off from others, or that had died, that had left behind these structures. They used those as hosting grounds for some of their soirees. They thought this was going to be a moment to seize instead of letting it go by. They wanted to make the most of this time. In general, one of the things that I've been really impressed by, and I'll be honest, a little bit surprised by, even though there have been fights over toilet paper and other things, I've been impressed that there hasn't been more lawlessness, more kind of reactionary behavior to the uncertainty. A lot of times when there are moments of kind of this chaos, there oftentimes can be rebellion and fighting back, looting and the sort. It's amazing to me to see how little of that there has been, although it's been interesting to hear reports in certain areas, petty crimes, even breaking and entering. The cops have basically said, we're not going to go after that. Overall, there's been a pretty good system of law. Unfortunately, though, at this time, there was so many people that had closed themselves off, there wasn't going to be people to go out and enforce the law. As a result, you can imagine that there was basically everything went. So people were able to go out and do what they wanted to do without fear of any type of punishment or enforcement. They said basically the law is at least on pause, if not completely obliterated. This is our opportunity to go out and make the most of it. Now, one of the saddest parts of this is as we think about people dying, what are you going to do with the bodies? There were so many people that passed away and perished because of the Black Plague that there was just this huge amount of bodies. And In the past, it's been funny. Some of you guys have heard of Monty Python. There's a funny scene in that. Uh, the title, I think, of that little moment was Bring Out Your Dead. And in the past, it's been funny just to see how wacky this Monty Python troupe was in their portrayal. It is ironic, though, and kind of sobering to think about how non funny that is right now. But either way, you're going to see the dead bodies that have piled up now having to be collected, and they would literally come down the street. Those dead relatives many times would just be pushed outside because they were afraid any disease that they held could be passed on to others. And so they wanted to now eliminate that possibility. They didn't have room in the cemeteries. It wasn't like normal times where you'd be able to bury your relatives. So instead, what they ended up doing were creating these big burial pits or trenches, and they would dump hundreds of bodies, even at a time, into them so that they would now have an opportunity to limit how many bodies were just laying around. Very, very hard time thinking about this for everyday society. As we think about the mid part, and I would say the 1350s, obviously a little bit further along than 1330s, we're seeing the plague starting to go down. Overall, we estimate there were about 75 million people that died during this time. As we think about that number, it's pretty significant. But the crazy thing is that over the next couple hundred years, there's going to be consistent recurrences of the Black Plague. Some people have said or suggested that it would come back every 10 to 20 years. Now, obviously, some outbreaks of it were going to be a lot more profound than others, but we're seeing several people dying each time. Again, they estimate somewhere again about 20 to 30% of the population at that point. It's amazing to see how they would basically have to keep refreshing itself within that window. Sometimes they were more localized, so it would be in only a certain area, whether that be Spain or France or wherever, but sometimes it was going to be a little bit further or wider spread. Those that did survive, those that were able to make it through, were going to be able to thrive and be able to pave the way for the Renaissance. When we come back from Easter, that is what our topic will be. We'll step into the Renaissance, getting to look at some of the government. We're going to look at three kind of case study areas that were going to be significant at that point. Just to kind of give you a teaser, we'll be looking specifically at Venice. Yeah, my brain just went blank here. Venice and Florence and Milan. So we'll be looking at those three specifically, giving an opportunity to kind of see how they're each different from each other. Looking forward to that a lot. But again, we'll save that until after Easter. I hope that you guys have a wonderful break, a good week and a half or so off. Many of you, if you've been in church over Easter, there's a refrain that goes something like this. The pastor, or usually the person in our front, will say, "He is risen," speaking about Jesus. And the response is that, as it has been for years, generations, He is risen indeed. Thankful that we serve a risen Savior. Hope that you guys have a wonderful Easter, celebrating Christ and what He has done for you. I'll talk to you guys and see you when we come back from Easter. If there's anything you need, please feel free to email me, Schoology message me, and I'd be even happy to set up a Zoom if you need to connect with me. Hope you guys have a great break, and I'll see you back once we return. Take care.